Hello guys, hello teacher. Today we'll discuss the investigation of mechanisms of nerve regulation of visceral functions of an organism. Mehdi will start with an introduction.
Introduction. The ability to maintain homeostasis and perform the activities of daily living in an ever-changing physical environment is largely vested in the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system functions at the subconscious level and is involved in regulating, adjusting and coordinating vital visceral functions such as blood pressure and blood flow, body temperature, respiration, digestion, metabolism, and elimination.
Autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system, formerly the vegetative nervous system, is a division of the peripheral nervous system that supplies smooth muscle and glands and thus influences the function of internal organs. The autonomic nervous system is activated mainly by centers located in the spinal cord, brainstem, and hypothalamus. Also, portions of the cerebral cortex, especially of the limbic cortex, can transmit signals to the lower centers and in this way influence autonomic control.
Functions. Autonomic functions include control of respiration, cardiac regulation, the cardiac control center, vasomotor activity, the vasomotor center, and certain reflex actions such as coughing, sneezing, swallowing, and vomiting. Those are then subdivided into other areas and are also linked to autonomic subsystems and their peripheral nervous system. This system works autonomously, without a person's conscious efforts.
The autonomic nervous system also often operates by means of visceral reflexes, that is, subconscious sensory signals from a visceral organ can enter the autonomic ganglia, the brainstem, or the hypothalamus, and then return subconscious reflex responses directly back to the visceral organ to control its activities. The efferent autonomic signals are transmitted to the various organs of the body through two major subdivisions called the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. This system is the primary mechanism in control of the fight or flight response. The autonomic nervous system, two divisions, sympathetic and parasympathetic. The sympathetic division is dominant in stressful situations, which include anger, fear, or anxiety. During a stress situation, we can see mydriasis, reduced saliva flow, heart rate accelerated, blood pressure rise, blood flow shifts from skin and gastrointestinal tract to the skeletal muscle and brain. Blood sugar increased. Bronchioles and pupils dilate. Rate of secretion of exocrine glands involved in digestion diminishes. Vasoconstriction and shunting of blood away from skin and into the muscles and brain.
The parasympathetic nervous system is sometimes also called the rest and digest system. It is involved bodily functions that occur in normal, non-stressful situations. It conserves energy as it slows the heart rate, increases the intestinal and gland activity, and relaxes sphincter muscles in the gastrointestinal tract and bladder contraction.
The sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system shows the general organization of the peripheral portions of the sympathetic nervous system. Shown specifically in the figure are one of the two paravertebral sympathetic chains of ganglia that are interconnected with the spinal nerves on the side of the vertebral column, two prevertebral ganglia, the celiac and hypogastric, and three nerves extending from the ganglia to the different internal organs. The sympathetic nerve fibers originate in the spinal cord along with the spinal nerves between cord segments T1 and L2 and pass first into into the sympathetic chain and then to the tissues and organs that are stimulated by the sympathetic nerves. The preganglionic and postganglionic sympathetic neurons. The sympathetic nerves are different from skeletal motor nerves in the following way. Each sympathetic pathway from the cord to the stimulated tissue is composed of two neurons, a preganglionic neuron and a postganglionic neuron, in contrast to only a single neuron in skeletal motor pathway. The cell body of each preganglionic neuron lies in the intermediolateral horn of the spinal cord. Its fiber passes through an anterior root of the cord into the corresponding spinal nerve. Immediately after the spinal nerve leaves the spinal canal, the preganglionic sympathetic fibers leave the spinal nerve and pass through a white ramus into one of the ganglia of the sympathetic chain. Then the course of the fibers can be one of the following three. 1. It can synapse with postganglionic sympathetic neurons in the ganglion that it enters. 2. It can pass upward or downward in the chain and synapse in one of the other ganglia of the chain. And 3. It can pass for variable distances through the chain and then through one of the sympathetic nerves radiating outward from the brain, finally synapsing in a peripheral sympathetic ganglion. The postganglionic sympathetic neuron thus originates either in one of the sympathetic chain ganglia or in one of the peripheral sympathetic ganglia. From either of these two sources, the postganglionic fibers then travel to either destinations in the various organs.
The parasympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic fibers leave the central nervous system through cranial nerves 3, 7, 9, and 10. Additional parasympathetic fibers leave the lowermost part of the spinal cord through the second and third sacral spine nerves, and occasionally the first and fourth sacral nerves. About 75% of all parasympathetic nerve fibers are in the vagus nerves, cranial nerve X, which means 10, passing to the entire thoracic and abdominal regions of the body. Preganglionic and postganglionic parasympathetic neurons. The parasympathetic system, like the sympathetic, has both preganglionic and postganglionic neurons. However, except in the case of a few cranial parasympathetic nerves, the preganglionic fibers pass uninterrupted all the way to the organ that is to be controlled. In the wall of the organ are located the postganglionic neurons. The preganglionic fibers synapse with these and very short postganglionic fibers, a fraction of a millimeter to several centimeters in length, leave the neurons to innervate the tissue of the organ. Dislocation of the parasympathetic postganglionic neurons in the visceral organ itself is quite different from the arrangement of sympathetic ganglia, because the cell bodies of sympathetic postganglionic neurons are most always located in the ganglia of the sympathetic chain or in various other discrete ganglia in the abdomen, rather than the excited organ itself.
Distinguishing features of sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. First, sympathetic originates in thoracic and lumbar regions of the spinal cord, T1, L2.
On the other hand, parasympathetic originates in brainstem, cranial nerves 3, 7, 9, 10, and sacral regions of the spinal cord S2 to S4.
Ganglia located in the paravertebral sympathetic ganglion chain or collateral ganglia.
Parasympathetic terminal ganglia located near or embedded within the target tissue.
Short cholinergic preganglionic fibers, long adrenergic postganglionic fibers.
Here, long cholinergic preganglionic fibers and short cholinergic postganglionic fibers.
The ratio of preganglionic fibers to postganglionic fibers is 1 to 20.
The ratio of preganglionic fibers to postganglionic fibers is 1 to 3.
Divergence coordinates activity of neurons at multiple levels of spinal cord.
Here are limited divergence.
Activity often involves mass discharge of entire system.
On the other hand, activity normally to discrete organs.
Predominates during fight, flight or fight reaction, and exercise.
Predominates during quiet resting conditions. Thank you for listening today. We used the textbook of Medical Physiology, Gayton, and Essential of Anatomy and Physiology. Thank you.